Chapter 993. The Fall of Falcon Scott. The devouring cloud posed an existential threat to Falcon Scott, but strangely, Sonny was not too worried, at least for himself. Perhaps it was the marble shell that gave him confidence, or perhaps it was the presence of the other ascended irregulars. The four of them were a fearsome force by themselves, and there were thousands of other awakened defending the city, to boot. Not to mention countless mundane soldiers, impregnable fortifications, and two entire saints. Sky Tide had been away, fighting the winter beast somewhere in the wilderness. It was unknown whether she would be able to return in time to participate in today's battle, but Bloodwave was here, protecting the anchored ships. If things went south, he would undoubtedly interfere. Master Jet studied the approaching brood swarm, her icy blue eyes cold and calculating. Then she sighed. Something is different. Sonny glanced at her with a silent question, prompting Soul Reaper to shake her head. The devouring cloud is behaving differently from how the reports described it. He frowned, then glanced at the distant haze. Indeed, the swarm was acting a bit differently from how it had been before. It seemed slightly less erratic, slightly more driven. The speed with which the devouring world consumed distance was greater than Sonny had expected. Summoning his helmet, Dale shrugged. They probably sensed the 200 million souls behind us, who wouldn't hurry to get to a feast. Winter smiled. Well then, let's show them some hospitality. She remained motionless for a few moments, then raised her hands and cautiously removed her sunglasses. A deep sigh escaped from her lips. That was the first time Sonny saw Winter's eyes. They were entirely black, with pupils that resembled 2 drops of coagulated blood. Looking into them made him deeply, irrationally uncomfortable. Begin. Several awakened, 3 from Soul Reaper's cohort and 1 from Dale's, stepped forward. Following Sonny's nod, Luster did the same. In this battle, Winter was going to be the tip of their spear. Her aspect would play a key role, and so it had to be augmented as much as possible. Several memories started to manifest in the air around the ascended archer: a beautiful handheld mirror, a small skull with a precious jewel embedded into its forehead, a silver coin with the image of a beautiful woman on one side and that of a hideous monster on the other. And at the same time, the 4 awakened activated their own abilities. One started to draw a complicated circle around Winter, saturating it with essence as he went. Another concentrated on the memories, somehow channeling more power into them. Luster simply placed his hand on her shoulder and then sent Sonny a strangely pleased glance. That fool. Sonny rolled his eyes and walked a few steps away. He wrapped one shadow around his body and the other 3 around Morgan's warbow, then evaluated how much essence he had left. It was not as much as he would have wanted, but enough to summon the strike of thunder many times, as well as manifest countless soul arrows in between the shots. He would be able to activate the dying wish as well, if the abominations managed to get close to the wall. Today, Sonny had a personal goal to slaughter as many of the brood beasts as possible, hundreds of them or maybe even 1,000. With almost all the vile creatures being awakened, he would not be getting many fragments, but that was all right. What he wanted were memories anyway, the more the better, no matter how weak. What do you think, Sonny? Are we going to win today? He glanced at Master Jet, who was calmly spinning a simple shuriken in her hand. The aura of illusory, cold radiating from her seemed especially chilling right now. He shrugged. Sure, why not? It's just a bunch of ugly flying leeches. Soul Reaper grinned and did not say anything else. A few minutes later, the devouring cloud entered the firing range of the rail guns. Once again, the thunderous sound of heaving tungsten rounds shattering the sound barrier made the whole wall vibrate. Even though Sonny knew that the bombardment had to have killed countless creatures, it seemed as though the distant haze simply swallowed them. There was not even the smallest ripple or rift in the uninterrupted veil of flying horrors. Crap! Then the turrets and the MWPs joined the barrage and unleashed a hail of bullets. Numerous tracer rounds flew from the wall into the rolling cloud of brood beasts. It was strangely beautiful, as though a shining rain was falling from the ground into the sky, struggling to pierce the black veil of extinguishing darkness. As if utterly untouched by the devastating onslaught, the devouring cloud continued forward without ever slowing down. By now, the hum of countless leathery wings had grown loud enough to seep through the clamor of the firing guns, spreading through the air like the murmur of a vast sea. The creatures were already close enough for the illusion of a hazy veil to fall apart into the harrowing visage of myriads of black dots swarming in the air. Sonny grimaced, then drew his bow and sent the strike of thunder into the approaching horde. Before the furious bolt of lightning reached it, he was already pulling on the string again, an arrow of pale gold appearing on it. A flash of stark, eclectic light illuminated a tiny portion of the swarm, followed by the whispers of the spell. Crap! At that point, the devouring cloud was supposed to slow down. It had just reached the edge of the vast killing field between the city wall and the mountains, coming into view of numerous piles of nightmare creature carcasses covering the ground. The brood beasts were supposed to turn their attention to that plentiful source of food before continuing toward Falcon Scott in full force. However, they did not. Acting in contradiction to all the analytical reports by Army Command, the swarm ignored the feast of rotting flesh completely, and instead accelerated forward even more. That was when Winter finally made her move. Taking a deep breath, she raised her bow and summoned a single, fiery arrow. Her black eyes seemed to become even darker still, and the crimson blood drops of her pupils shone with an eerie, ominous glow. The string of the bow rang, and the flaming arrow flashed through the darkness, leaving a blazing trail behind. When it hit, the darkness of the polar night was suddenly no more. The moment Winter's arrow reached the devouring cloud, a brilliant flash of light blinded everyone for a moment. A vast sphere of flame bloomed in the middle of the swarm, spreading far and wide like a rolling wave of destruction. Then it collapsed on itself and exploded once more. Tongues of flame spread through the mass of abominations, swallowing countless brood beasts. Some were turned to ash, some fell down to the ground like burning stars. Others continued to burn as they streaked chaotically through the sky, their flesh boiling and dissipating. But they did not die before colliding with some of their vile brethren. The fire spread. As if possessing a mind of its own, it continued to spread from one abomination to another, until it seemed as though the sky itself was aflame. The darkness was chased out by the furious orange-white glow, and Sonny felt something that he had never expected to feel in the middle of winter in Antarctica. Scorching heat caressing his skin. He sucked in a shaky breath. Damn! It seemed that all their preparations were not in vain. Winter's opening was nothing short of breathtaking. It was outright frightening if he was honest. But it was just an opening nevertheless. Although the devouring cloud had sustained considerable losses and had to slow down, it was in no way stopped. Already, some brood beasts were charging through the wall of fire, lunging toward the city. Grinning at the sight of the fiery slaughter, Sonny shook off his momentary shock and drew Morgan's warbow again. More, I need to kill more. Another bolt of lightning slammed into the swarm, reaping a multitude of lives. An arrow of pale gold pierced a brood beast clean through, then continued to fly forward, killing several others. There were so many abominations that Sonny did not even have to aim. The 4 cohorts of irregulars, as well as all the rest of the awakened defenders, poured all their strength into destroying the descending tide of winged horrors. Even though it seemed as if the sky itself was falling on them, vast swathes of it enveloped in flame, no one's courage broke. It was natural to fear for one's life, but with 200 million people depending on their protection, the soldiers of the First Army stubbornly clung to their positions despite the terror of the approaching swarm. By his side, Soul Reaper waved her hands, dozens of throwing stars appearing between her fingers and shooting forward with terrible speed, shredding a whole swathe of the swarm like a steel rain. A few steps away, Samara was methodically discharging her rifle, explosions of essence blossoming in the mass of nightmare creatures. Pieces of torn flesh and streams of blood rained down without stop. The rest of the devils were doing their part. Winter was not at all done with her part of the slaughter either. One after another, enchanted arrows flew from the string of her bow, with 4 awakened elites using their aspects to augment hers and a number of powerful memories feeding her their power. The ascended archer became a source of shocking devastation. Sunny finally understood why Winter was sometimes called a walking artillery unit. There were a lot of arrows in her arsenal capable of widespread destruction, and augmented as she was, the scope of that destruction only grew. Thanks to her aspect, the arrows never missed. And with luster continuously feeding her soul essence, she had no reason to stop. The devouring cloud was melting in front of his eyes. Mort! Sunny strained his muscles to draw the string, the process of dismissing and summoning the strike of thunder back finally finished. Just in time, a fierce bolt of lightning pierced the air once again. You have slain. You have slain. You have slain. You have received. And yet, even with all that destruction summoned upon the brood swarm, it was still advancing on the city. Half of the vast killing field had already disappeared in its shadow, and the first of the winged horrors were already reaching the wall. Somewhere to his left, a massive MWP stumbled, the appalling shape of a brood beast disappearing into the breach in the war platform's armor that it had just created with the circular, fleshy maw. The creature crawled into the pilot's cabin. In the next moment, the massive machine jerked erratically and stepped back, plummeting from the battlement into the darkness. Sunny uttered a silent curse. At the same time, Dale stepped closer to Winter. A spherical dome of transparent energy enveloped the two of them, as well as all the awakened standing nearby. Their arrows and bullets easily passed through the dome to hit the enemies, but when a lone brood beast lunged at Winter from above, it collided against the wall of shimmering energy as if against solid stone. The creature's body bounced away in a rain of blood. I guess it's time for Sunny now. Jet's voice confirmed his own thoughts. They briefly glanced at each other, then dashed away from the irregulars. Sunny dismissed his bow, took a deep breath, and summoned the sin of solace instead. Instantly, an insidious voice, his own voice, spoke into his ear. Huh? Are you still pretending that you can actually save anyone? You know. Shut the hell up, no one asked. Gritting his teeth, Sunny followed Soul Reaper until they reached a relatively empty section of the wall a couple of 100 meters away from the position of the irregulars. She shouted at the nearby soldiers, commanding them to retreat. Then Jet turned to Sunny and flashed him a wicked smile. Are you ready? He nodded. Then activate that charm of yours. Sunny sighed, then poured essence into the dying wish. At the same time, he wrapped all 4 shadows around his body and activated the underworld armament trait of the marble shell, enhancing the effect of the charm. His goals here were rather simple. He needed to give Winter as much time as possible to eradicate the swarm, and at the same time, prevent brood beasts from flying into the city. What better way was there to achieve both than to present the devouring cloud with an irresistibly tasty target? The plan was bound to work. Its only downside was that, for a while, Sunny would have to survive the attention of the entire swarm. Somehow, the world seemed trapped in a violent seizure. The darkness of the endless night was savaged, torn apart by the spreading wildfire, and the disorienting flashes of numerous firing armaments. The cacophony of thunderous salvos and inhuman shrieks fused into an almost palpable force, pressing down on Sunny from all sides. Some distance away, above the burning hellscape of the killing field, the devouring cloud had reformed itself to create a breach in the wall of flames. A dark mass of brood beasts poured forward, rushing to reach the defensive barrier of the last human city. The incoming segment of the swarm swirled, forming into a long and vast protuberance. It looked like a giant tentacle that grew and twisted, aiming for a single spot on the city wall, the dome of shimmering energy where Dale and Winter were making their stand. Something is indeed very wrong. Since when was the devouring cloud so purposeful? How could the swarm of mindless brood beasts not only identify the deadliest threat, but also show enough coordinated intent to try taking it out first? Feeling a chill run down his spine, Sonny activated the dying wish and watched as the tip of the dark protuberance pivoted, changing its direction to attack him instead. Wonderful! He glanced at Jet, lingered for a moment, and then asked in a hoarse voice, "Are we sure that we want to do this?" Soul Reaper lowered her graceful glaive, a thin layer of ice slowly condensing on its silver blade. Brushing her raven-black hair back, she smiled from the corner of her mouth. "What do our wishes have to do with anything?" Sonny looked back at the approaching swarm and sighed. Fair enough. At that point, most of the armaments on the southern section of the wall had concentrated their fire on the advancing protuberance. It was being torn by the heavy tungsten rounds of the rail guns, the squall of bullets unleashed by countless turrets, the sporadic rifle fire of mundane infantrymen, the memories and abilities of awakened soldiers. As Sonny watched, swarms of miniature missiles shot from the shoulders of the towering MWPs, streaking across the sky and blasting countless abominations to shreds. The attacking swarm was continuously breaking and rebuilding itself, new brood beasts instantly taking the place of the slain ones to close the gaps. It was not showing any signs of slowing down, though, which meant that Sonny would not escape it. Well, he was not worried. "Sure you are." Sonny winced and glanced at the Sin of Solace with displeasure. His mental defenses were supposed to be quite high right now. Why wasn't the damned sword affected at all? "Ah, yes. Your new shiny shell, as good a reason to feel confident as any, I guess. And if that is not enough, you can always escape into the shadows. Right." Sonny pretended not to hear the insidious voice. "Have you not stopped to think about Jet, though? Where would she escape? Are you ready to watch her die? You better be. An outsider like her does not matter anyway." Sonny glanced at Master Jet, who was observing the swarm by his side. Her beautiful face was calm and focused. He sighed. "You are very proud of yourself, aren't you? Toying with me, playing on my deepest fears and insecurities, but aren't you embarrassed of yourself a little?" The Sin of Solace did not answer. "I'll admit, you did catch me by surprise a couple of times. However, now that I know what to expect, why would such childish jabs have any effect on me? I don't know whether you really are the voice of the cursed sword, or simply a part of my own subconscious twisted by it, although the latter seems more probable. However, one thing I do know is that you are out of your league here, buddy." He shook the beautiful giant slightly. "I mean, who do you think you are? You are not the voice of Ariel, the demon of dread. You are merely a memory of an echo of a whisper, something that pathetic wants to drive me crazy. Please, don't make me laugh." There were a few moments of silence, and then the insidious voice answered mockingly. "And yet, here you are, talking to an imaginary voice in the middle of a battle." Sonny smiled. "So what? Hearing voices and talking to myself is somewhat of a hobby of mine. Been there, done that." He pushed the annoying whispers to the back of his mind and concentrated on what was about to come. A small shadow suddenly fell from the sky. Sunny almost moved to attack it but then held himself back. In the next moment, a familiar crow landed on Jet's shoulder, glanced at him arrogantly, and turned to its master. Swam, swam. Jet patted the bird on the head with a small smile. Yes, I know. Now go, it is going to be too dangerous for you. The crow let out an outraged caw and spread its wings to make itself look bigger, but to no avail. She had already dismissed the echo, making it dissipate into a swirl of sparks. A few seconds later, the swarm was upon them. The first of the lunging brood beast was cleanly severed in half by Jet's glaive, two bleeding slabs of hideous flesh flying over the wall to fall into the siege camp below. But the next one was already attacking. Sunny allowed his mind to switch into the state of battle clarity, or rather, dive deeper into it, since clarity had long become like second nature to him. His thoughts accelerated, and his perception of the world became sharper, clearer, and more encompassing. He moved forward with light steps, the sin of solace flashing through the air to pierce the creature's body. Its flesh parted before the jade blade like water. At the same time, the shadows around them stirred, and a dozen black tentacles rose from them, grabbing the attacking brood beasts and tearing them apart. The tentacles were different and much more complex than the ones he had usually summoned before. These ones had joints and a semblance of structure, ending with crude, but nimble and powerful hands. Sunny's long hours of practice had not been in vain. He had pushed his grasp of shadow manifestation forward by a lot. Of course, using it burned through his essence. Everything Sunny did required him to spend essence, weaving shadow strings, repeatedly summoning the strike of thunder, sustaining and augmenting the effect of the dying wish, saturating his body with resilience and strength. Any other master would have been drained of all energy already. But Sunny's reserves of essence were vast and potent, more than 4 times the volume of almost anyone else of the same rank. At the same time, his control of it was nothing short of exquisite, allowing for near-perfect efficiency. He had a lot of fight left in him still. The question was whether that would be enough. The swarm of brood beasts descended upon Sunny and Master Jet. The two of them moved with speed that would have seemed utterly inhuman to mundane soldiers. If any of them had remained nearby, curiously enough, a master would have been stunned just as much. Both ascended irregulars were showing a level of physical prowess that only those with extremely powerful combat aspects were supposed to possess. Soul Reaper's glaive turned into a blur as she spun it, dissecting scores of the ghastly abominations. The beautiful jade giant danced like a feather, harvesting life after life. Of course, neither Sunny nor Jet remained static, moving across the wide expanse of the battlement like a hurricane of cutting steel. They danced between the attacking nightmare creatures, never remaining in one spot long enough to be buried under their onslaught. Well, Sunny danced. His battle style was graceful and fluid, to the point where it seemed as though he had no rigid shape at all. Master Jet, on the other hand, fought with the dire and straightforward inevitability of an experienced butcher, slaughtering her enemies both methodically and ruthlessly. There was an awful beauty to her mesmerizing savagery, as well. Get ready. Sunny did not need the warning. The whirlwind of abominations surrounding them was already bad enough, but it was also just the beginning. Most of the protuberance of the devouring cloud had yet to reach them, and the situation was about to become many times worse. Oh, why did I come to this damned continent? Full of self-pity, he pivoted to the right, narrowly avoided a diving brood beast, and brandished the sin of solace to cut down another one. At the same time, he glanced over the edge of the wall, where a long stretch of the world was obscured by the swarm of abominations. By now, the two of them were surrounded from all sides, but most of the enemies were still coming from a single direction. The good news was that the dying wish was working, preventing the brood beasts from passing the wall and escaping into the city. The bad news was that he could not see the glow of winter's flames at all now, which meant that the part of the swarm attacking them was a second at most from growing much harder to deal with. There had to be really many of them to obscure the wildfire entirely. Sunny called upon the shadows, and a black wall suddenly rose between the battlement and the main body of the protuberance. Countless brood beasts slammed into it in the next moment, impaling themselves on the sharp spikes that shot from the black surface. Even more had to twist in the air to avoid the obstacle. That did not slow the swarm much, but it did funnel it somewhat, giving Sunny and Jet some room to breathe. At least for a moment. Then things got really tense. Arg, damn it. There were too many brood beasts lunging at him to kill and evade them all. Sunny did his best, but it was still not enough. Even with the help of shadow hands, he was forced to receive several attacks head-on. Making his body as heavy as a slab of rock, Sunny gritted his teeth and stood his ground. A disgusting leathery body slammed into him. If he had not used the feather of truth to change his mass, the impact would have thrown Sunny to the ground, or even worse, off the wall. As it was, he only took half a step back, while the brood beast bounced back with the nauseating crunch of breaking bones. Ah, that hurt. Before Sunny could do anything, another creature tore into his forearm. The leather vambrace of the puppeteer's shroud held some of the horrid fangs back, but not all of them. However, the creature's fangs scraped fruitlessly against Sunny's skin, not leaving even a scratch on it. He grinned. "Chew on this, bastard." With that, Sunny spun the sin of solace into reverse grip and easily cut through the abomination's long neck. Usually, it would have been hard to deal any damage from such an awkward position, but the jade blade of the cursed sword was so sharp that he did not have to put any effort into the cut at all. The brood beast's body convulsed and fell down. Its severed maw, however, was still stubbornly trying to gnaw on Sunny's flesh. Whatever. Ignoring the vice-like and unpleasantly moist grasp of the creature's jaw, he threw himself back into the battle. A few moments later, it flew off his forearm, pulled away by powerful inertia. Sadly, that was not the last abomination that managed to hit him. As their number grew and grew, Sunny started to miss more attacks. Most of them failed to penetrate the adamantine barrier of the marble shell, but a few did not. There were now shallow scratches here and there on his body, and their number was swiftly increasing. Master Jet was in a similar position, although she did not seem to be bothered by it at all. Even though her black leather armor was torn and shredded, revealing glimpses of alabaster skin and trickles of crimson blood, she fought with the same unrestrained, magnificent brutality. There was even a dark, wicked grin on her face. What is wrong with that woman? He wasted a moment to shift his sight and glance at her core, only to see that it was brimming with essence, full to the limit. That cost him another scratch, as well as a pang of envy. Damn it, Master Jet's aspect is simply cheating. To be fair, his aspect was somewhat of a cheat as well. More than that, both of them were fighting in nearly optimal conditions. Soul Reaper was well suited to fight against large numbers of weaker enemies, who could provide her with a nearly endless supply of essence, while Sunny was a true menace when surrounded by shadows. Throughout the cruel length of the polar night, the whole world was enveloped by shadows, and he was their master. And yet, both of them were in dire danger. Even if individual brood beasts did not pose much of a threat to the two ascended, thousands and thousands of them did. An army of ants was more than capable of killing an elephant. Whatever an elephant was. Grinding his teeth, Sunny danced between the countless abominations and felt his own essence disappear with frightening speed. Winter better be very busy obliterating the main body of the swarm fast. Black pillars of smoke rose into the sky, obscuring the stars like a smoldering veil. Between the roiling dark heaven and the cold, ravaged land, a fiery inferno seethed and swarmed, drowning the world in a scorching orange glow. Surrounded by numerous abominations and the cacophonous roar of heavy armaments, Sunny and Jet fought against the devouring cloud. The wind was picking up. Struggling not to slip on the fetid blood that covered the alloy expanse of the battlement, Sunny pulled Soul Reaper close and bent down, summoning a dome of shadows to surround them. His breathing was hoarse and labored. There was no light inside the improvised shelter, and the brood beasts were already attacking it, the whole structure trembling under an onslaught of heavy blows. Worse still, he did not dare to sustain the barrier for more than a few seconds. Afraid that the swarm would lose interest and shift its attention to the city beyond. "I won't last much longer." Master Jet was uncomfortably close, her physical state as battered and bloodied as his. Her chest rose and fell erratically, betraying the same level of exhaustion. Nevertheless, her voice sounded calm. "You can't fight anymore." He shook his head, then spoke after realizing that she probably could not see him. "No, not that. The charm, I don't have enough essence left to keep it active for long." She lingered for a moment. "Do what you can. After that, let's see what fate has in store." Sunny winced at her choice of words, then considered if it was time to summon Nightmare. The black steed would be helpful in surviving the tide of brood beasts, but the two of them were not at the point of needing to be rescued yet. It was supplying the dying wish with essence that was the problem. Nightmare was also large and lacked armor. His main defense was speed and viciousness, which would not protect him against the swarm. If the Shadow Stallion sustained heavy wounds today, Sunny would not be able to call upon him tomorrow. Back to the slaughter, then. He glanced at Jet. "Ready." She smiled in the darkness. "Always." He allowed the suffering shadows to lose substance, and the black dome fell apart around them. Immediately, a flood of brood beasts descended upon the two ascended. Sunny and Jet were pushed back to back, unable to move. The jade longsword and the silver glaive blurred, tearing through the ghastly abominations. The smell of blood permeated the air. It was somewhat of a heroic scene, exactly like what he had often seen in dramas and webtoons about Valiant Awakened. Not very practical, though. Stuck in one spot and limited in where he could move, Sunny became a perfect target. "Curse it!" A strong gale of wind slammed into them, throwing many brood beasts off course. Jet used that moment to lunge forward and brandish her glaive, causing an explosion of frost to spread through the swarm and clear a bit of space around them. High above, the veil of smoke looked like storm clouds. Sunny was still feeding his essence into the dying wish and sustaining the augmentation of the underworld armament, hopping to buy Winter another minute, maybe half a minute of time. But the devouring cloud seemed to have suddenly learned how to resist Solvin's charm. Without any provocation, the mass of brood beasts shifted, flashing past the two bloodied masters. Ignoring the alluring enchantment of the dying wish, they lunged in the direction where Dale's protective barrier still shimmered with mystical energy. "What the hell?" Sunny slashed at the nearest abomination, cutting it in half. The other brood beast simply ignored him and flew away. "You have slain an awakened beast, brood of the devouring cloud. You have received." He ignored the quiet whisper of the spell and stared at the apocalyptic scene of the battlefield. The killing field below the wall was enveloped in flame. The sky was burning with red embers as well. The main body of the swarm seemed diminished somewhat. Where once there had been an uninterrupted wall of winged horrors, now there was a tattered curtain of them, with vast breaches and gaps in its vile, seething mass. Winter and all the other defenders did not waste the time he had bought them. The problem, however, was that the flames unleashed by the ascended archer in her initial attack had almost died down, and now the whole of the devouring cloud was advancing on the city. This was a key moment. Winter had to break their advance once and for all, and for that to happen, nothing could interrupt her. Got it. Sonny prepared himself, ready to dash toward the position of the rest of the irregulars. He could see a dark tentacle of the thin protuberance slamming into Dale's barrier, the wind howling so loudly that it drowned out the thunder of the firing rail guns for a moment. The barrier grew dimmer, but held for now. A radiant arrow escaped from it, streaking across the killing field and disappearing into the devouring cloud. Then, it was as though a large portion of the swarm imploded in on itself, countless abominations being violently pulled and crushed by an invisible force. However, it was still not enough. Dale's barrier was growing dimmer and dimmer, and the swarm was still advancing, a dozen seconds away from crashing into the defenders of the city. Not enough. And then a vast shadow fell from the sky, tearing through the veil of smoke and storm clouds obscuring it. At the same time, a devastating net of lightning enveloped the devouring cloud, turning the world white for a second. Thousands of abominations were instantly burned to ash. A giant bird of prey with white feathers and devastating talons of lustrous steel dove into the swarm. Her enormous wings were wreathed in thunderclouds, and bolts of lightning danced around her body like a cloak. A hurricane of wind, summoned by her arrival, threw the center of the devouring cloud into disarray. Sonny froze. Sky tied. St. Tyrus looked battered and exhausted, but still incredibly fearsome. Her white feathers were painted by blood, and there was a thin layer of ice covering many parts of her body. Despite all that, she cut through the swarm like a blade of a guillotine, and at the same time, powerful winds pressed the abominations down and pushed them away from the city. Sonny stared at the incredible scene in tired silence. He had never been that happy to see a saint before. Lowering the sin of solace, he looked at Master Jet. A somewhat confused question escaped from his lips. Have we won? She lingered for a moment, then shrugged. It seems that W. Before Soul Reaper could finish the sentence, however, the city wall suddenly quaked under them. The wall trembled violently, almost throwing Sonny off his feet. He caught himself from falling and spun, the sin of solace flying into a defensive stance. What the hell was that? Master Jet used her glaive to keep herself upright and looked around. For the first time since the start of the battle, her expression became grim. She did not answer for a couple of seconds. Then, her icy eyes widened slightly. Soul Reaper turned to Sonny, trying to say something, but he had already sensed it himself. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The call of the nightmare had suddenly grown much louder, assaulting his mind with an onslaught of screaming whispers. In the next moment, the world came undone, and the piercing sound of tearing alloy filled Sonny's ears. The battlement beneath him was falling apart, and a strong aftershock of whatever it was that had destroyed it rolled through the air, throwing him away. No! Sonny did not see it yet, but he already understood what had happened. A nightmare gate had just opened right below where he and Jet had fought, annihilating a large section of the wall. An ugly rift in reality tore through the armored alloy, turning it into nothing. The vertical schism of pure nothingness played strange tricks with both light and darkness, making it appear simultaneously perfectly flat and inconceivably deep. A litany of inaudible screams thundered out of it in deafening silence, washing over the world like a demented call. The wall was breached from top to bottom, some of it devoured by the gate, the rest simply collapsing when the supporting structure suddenly disappeared. Sonny plummeted down in a rain of debris. Before he could truly comprehend what was happening, his body brushed against the boundary of the gate. Instantly, an explosion of blinding pain enveloped his body and soul, and a strange, repelling force pushed him away. A nightmare gate was a one-way path. Creatures of the dream realm could enter through it into the waking world, but nothing from the waking world could pass through it into the land of nightmares. Only awakened could answer its call by sending their souls on a perilous journey. All they had to do was fall asleep in the vicinity of the rift. Masters and Saint could answer it too, by pulling on their own anchors, but not by physically stepping through the gate. Maybe sovereigns were different, but Sunny had no time to think about it. Or could think about it, really. For a few moments after experiencing the shock of brushing against the lightless rift, his mind became utterly blank. And when he came to his senses, he found himself falling from a 70-meter height, the ground approaching him with frightening speed. Still disoriented, Sunny scrambled to summon the dark wing, but then froze for a split second. There was not enough time for the translucent memory to manifest itself into existence and for its enchantment to activate. He had maybe 3 seconds left. Would a fall from that height kill him? Sunny did not know, and he did not want to find out. Even if he survived somehow, a flood of nightmare creatures would soon flow out of the gate to finish the job. Damn! Something heavy and sharp suddenly slammed into Sunny's head. A torn piece of the wall's frame. Following an instinct, Sunny reached forward and called upon the shadows of the falling pieces of debris. They moved, sliding toward his body. Sunny made himself as light as he could, and then manifested the shadows. In the next moment, a vast mantle of darkness surrounded him like a streaming black cape, catching the wind and slowing down his fall. It was almost enough. He hit the ground hard enough to bounce off of it and black out for a moment. The mantle of shadows was torn apart and dissipated. Sunny rolled away, his body a mass of pain, vaguely recognizing the landscape of the staging area around him. He came to a halt after violently slamming into the feet of a loader robot, then weakly crawled under it, hopping to hide from the raining debris. It was good thinking. Not a second later, a piece of alloy that must have weighed several tons crashed into the ground in the spot where Sunny had been just a moment ago. That was all Sunny could do, though. After taking shelter between the legs of the loader, all strength seemed to abandon him. All that was left was pain. Arg! He was alive, at least. Bone weave and the marble shell, as well as his ascended physique, had protected Sunny's body from being severely damaged. He was a bit shocked, that was all. Arguably, touching the gate had caused much more harm. Sunny did not know what kind of damage he had received, but it felt serious. He knew he could still fight, maybe, but not right now. Right now, he could hardly move. Not good. From his temporary shelter, Sunny had a clear view of the broken wall and the vast rift of nothingness pulsing darkly in the breach. A few soldiers and logistics specialists were running away from it, consumed by panic. A few more lay dead, killed by the debris. A tide of nightmare creatures was about to emerge from the gate, flood the staging area, and devour everyone here before escaping into the city. And Sunny was utterly defenseless. A cold voice suddenly resounded in his ear. "See, I told you that you're useless." Sunny gritted his teeth. "Shut up." His own laughter was the answer. "I also told you that Master Jet was going to die, didn't I?" He growled. "I said shut the hell up." Pushing through pain and weakness, Sunny forced himself to start crawling. He wanted to crawl away, but somehow found himself crawling toward the gate. The desire to flee had been subtly defeated by the desire to finish his job and defend the city, without him even noticing. I must have really lost it. What am I planning to do in this state? Maybe there was some trick left. No, there surely was. He was just too rattled and concussed to think of it. There was the dying wish. There was also nightmare. As a massive shape slowly revealed itself in the pulsating darkness of the gate, a familiar voice whispered into his ear. Sunny felt a flash of fury sear his mind. "Shut your mouth." But then he froze. That voice was not his. Ignoring the rude outburst, the spell spoke. "Your shadow has evolved, my shadow." Sunny opened his eyes wide. Saint. It seemed that Saint had finished her evolution into a devil ahead of schedule. All things considered, her timing was nothing short of impeccable. Even in his disoriented state, Sonny knew that he could not ignore such luck. As the first of the nightmare creatures emerged from the gate, he abandoned his attempts to crawl forward and called upon his shadow instead. The coldness of the polar night seemed to grow slightly darker. Then, an intricate sabaton forged out of black, stone-like metal stepped on the ground beside him. Sonny weakly turned his head to look up at Saint, who was as aloof as ever. His taciturn knight had changed. Initially, she had been roughly the same height as him, becoming taller after evolving into a demon. Now, Saint towered above Sonny. Obscured by the beautiful onyx armor, the lines of her stone body were still slender and graceful, but at more than 2 meters of height, the fearsome shadow seemed extremely imposing. Her oppressive presence was worthy of a devil. The black armor itself had not changed much. It had always been a product of magnificent craftsmanship, and seemed even more superb and menacing now. However, Saint's skin, which had been gray like stone before, then white as alabaster, was now as smooth and black as polished onyx. At least what little of it could be seen through the slits of her visor. The ruby jewels of her eyes burned with ominous crimson flames. Saint studied the vast rift of the nightmare gate indifferently, then glanced at Sonny. It almost seemed as though she had a lot of questions. He forced out a weak smile. "Yeah, stuff happened. I'm glad to see you too." Then he raised a trembling hand and pointed at the emerging nightmare creatures. Go deal with them if you don't mind. I'll stay here for a bit." Saint lingered for a moment, then silently turned to the flood of monstrous creatures and walked forward. Her steps were calm and steady. Sonny let his hand drop back to the ground. It's good to have her back." Hoisting himself up to sit, his back leaning against a piece of rubble, Sonny used some of his last essence to send the broken oath to the taciturn devil. Then, he commanded all 4 of his shadows to abandon him and embrace Saint instead. Her tall figure shone with a dark radiance. The shadows around the demonic knight swelled, becoming deeper and darker, surrounding her like a tenebrous mantle, which was all expected. What Sonny had not expected, however, was that there was a hint of true, elemental darkness in that lightless glow. It made him shiver. A few dozen meters away from them, the nightmare creatures were being born from the revolting nothingness of the gate. A flood of them rushed forward, chasing after the retreating soldiers and noncombatants. The abominations looked like tall, insecting humanoids with 6 hands each, their inhuman faces brimming with black eyes and jagged mandibles. They wore carapace armor and wielded weapons made of sharpened chitin, moving with astonishing speed and possessing dreadful might. As Sonny watched, one of the creatures easily threw a piece of the broken wall that must have weighed a ton aside. Unfazed, Saint opened her arms, as if trying to embrace the broken, burning world. Darkness flowed from under her vambraces, over her palms and into the air. A moment later, the flowing darkness formed into the shape of a familiar stone sword. It was whole once again, but utterly black in appearance. A feeling of dark, nebulous power radiated from its Stygian blade. On her other hand, a round shield of stone-like metal appeared, its surface the same polished onyx as the fearsome armor of the taciturn shadow. Walking toward the enemy, Saint raised her sword and struck the rim of her shield twice with its blade, as if challenging the harrowing tide of monsters. Damn! Sonny was too weak and mentally shaken to do anything, so he just sat on the ground, using a piece of rubble for support, and watched Saint fight. His shadow had simply walked forward, and then dove into the mass of enemies as soon as the last of the soldiers ran past her. She collided against the arachnid warriors with her shield, sending a dozen of them stumbling to the ground, and then turned into a whirlwind of annihilating darkness, her sword slicing through carapace armor, flesh, and bone as if nothing could stop it. Black blood, severed limbs, and broken bodies covered the ground. Saint was an ascended devil now, and augmented by all four of Sunny's shadows. The broken oath received the same augmentation, sapping strength and vitality from her enemies. The graceful knight fought with stunning clarity and sublime skill, and yet that was not enough to explain why Saint was so deadly and devastating. The abominations were not weak. It was she who was too strong, too fast, and too tyrannical. A simple evolution of one class could not explain the difference. A devil commands unnatural powers. That is what separates them from demons. Sunny's thoughts were slow and tangled, but he remembered that much. What powers had Saint received? Might as well take a look. It was not like Sunny could be of much use, currently. He lingered for a few moments, staring at the fearsome battle that was taking place merely 24 meters or so away from him. Saint was holding back the whole mob of nightmare creatures by herself, for now. He did not know how long she would last, or whether the abominations would flow past the slaughtering devil to escape into the city. If they did, he would be the first one to die. Sunny gathered his thoughts and activated the healing property of the dying wish first. That, at least, did not demand any essence, or maybe slowly accumulated it with each kill, creating a hidden reserve. The main effect of the enchantment had been deactivated long ago. A wave of healing energy spread through his body, repairing the damage done to it and lessening the pain. He was still weak, muddled, and suffering, though whatever touching the gate had done to him seemed to be more than a mere physical wound. Whatever. Next, Sunny summoned Nightmare. He did not send the Black Stallion to join the battle yet, ordering him to stand guard above his master. Somewhat satisfied with these measures, Sunny glanced at Saint again and summoned the runes. What the hell am I doing? Indeed, the wall of the city was breached. A menacing nightmare gate was towering above him, and not too far away, a furious battle was raging in the rabble of the staging area. And yet, Sunny was staring at the runes that shimmered brightly in the air in front of him. His vision was a little blurry, but the runes were clear and perfectly legible, as if existing outside of reality, which they probably did. Oh well. Sunny needed a couple of minutes to recover, anyway. He looked at the field of runes, searching for the names of his shadows. A new string of them replaced the old one. Onyx Saint. Onyx Huh. That had a nice ring to it. Marble Saint had turned into Onyx Saint. Was his marble shell going to evolve into the onyx shell as well once he transcended? Sunny would have loved to pursue that train of thought, but unfortunately he couldn't. His thoughts were slow and erratic, refusing to consider anything too complicated. Giving up, he concentrated on the runes of Saint's name and started to read the descriptions. Shadow Onyx Saint. Shadow rank ascended. Shadow class devil. Shadow attributes: Battle Master, Stalwart, Ember of Divinity, Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness, that's new. Sunny glanced at the mass of attacking arachnid warriors, catching a glimpse of Saint decapitating an especially menacing abomination with a swift slash of her black sword, then sending its body flying into the mob with a strike of her shield. Even before the rim of the shield connected with the creature's chest, the blade of the stone sword was already moving to deflect an incoming blow. She's not dead yet. He looked back to the runes. Attribute description: A vestige of an ancient darkness dwells in this shadow's heart, granting her tenebrous powers. So Saint had not just destroyed the sphere of black stone in the tunnel, she had taken something from it. Sunny had expected as much. The spark of divinity was also gone, replaced by the ember of divinity. The light of divinity and true darkness now coexisted within Saint, somehow. There was something interesting about that fact, but Sunny, in his pitiful state, could not quite point to what. Later. The sounds of the battle grew louder and a little closer, forcing him to look past the runes nervously and then hurry up. The gate guardian could arrive at any moment. Sunny lowered his gaze. Shadow abilities: Weapon Sage, Underworld Armament, Mantle of Darkness, Blade of Darkness. 2 new ones. The name of the first ability was a bit familiar. He concentrated on it and read. Ability: Mantle of Darkness. Ability description: Darkness embraces this shadow. When surrounded by darkness, and true darkness more so, her swiftness and might will increase. Her wounds will be healed and her heart will grow fuller. Sunny blinked a couple of times. Well, that explains how she is so powerful right now. If there was one thing that Antarctica did not lack, it was darkness. Although the staging area was usually well lit, most tech nearby had been destroyed by the pulse of the opening gate. Saint was wreathed in shadows. The physical augmentation of the Mantle of Darkness seemed to be a formidable one, and combined with the embrace of his 4 shadows, it produced a truly terrific result. What made him especially happy was that Saint would also be able to heal herself from now on, at least when surrounded by darkness. That alone was an incredible boon. The last part of the description spoke of her heart, but the rune could also mean soul. Sunny suspected that it alluded to both the true darkness dwelling in Saint's heart and her essence, or whatever it was that the shadow used instead of essence. The point was that its replenishment rate would be increased. These abilities were very similar to what the Black Knight had possessed, with one serious caveat. Unlike the fallen devil of the ruined cathedral, his own ascended devil seemed to possess dual affinity, both to the shadows and to the elemental darkness. Those were supposed to be mutually exclusive, but were not in her case. It seemed that Saint's nature as a shadow led to a curious result. His graceful knight paradoxically enjoyed the favor of both mundane and true darkness. Recalling how harrowing his journey through the underground tunnel had been, Sunny could not help but feel envious. Interesting. Finally, he turned his gaze to the second of the 2 new abilities. Blade of Darkness. Ability description: The true darkness dwelling in the shadow's heart can be summoned in the form of a fearsome weapon, as long as the shadow has mastered the use of that weapon. The Blade of Darkness can slay those of flesh and those of spirit. It never dulls, never falters, and never breaks. Alternatively, the darkness can be summoned to augment a mundane weapon. Sunny smiled. So she fixed her sword herself in the end. The Blade of Darkness was a truly powerful ability, indeed. Since Saint was a battle master and a weapon sage, she could wield any weapon with superb proficiency, which meant that the true darkness she was a vessel of could take any form. The dark weapon would be as strong as Saint was herself, growing stronger if Saint evolved again in the future. It was capable of killing both corporeal and incorporeal creatures. It could even be used to augment an existing weapon or a weapon-type memory, both making it more powerful and adding an elemental property to its attacks. All of it was simply amazing. And when Sunny gathered enough memories, he flinched when something thundered, sending a strong shockwave through the ground. Looking past the runes, Sunny saw a massive shape emerging from the gate. The Guardian had arrived. Somewhere beyond the wall, Sky Tide was still fighting the devouring cloud. The wall had been breached, and he had no idea if the other irregulars still lived. Master Jet was nowhere to be seen, and probably. No, don't think about it. She won't be so easily killed anyway. And lastly, Saint was standing her ground against a whole swarm of dreadful nightmare creatures, surrounded by nothing but enemies and carnage. Even as powerful as she had become, the force arrayed against her was still dire and overwhelming. Sunny let out a tortured sigh. Ah, no rest for the wicked. Struggling against pain and sickening weakness, he staggered to his feet and grabbed Nightmare, afraid that he might fall again. Then, Sonny looked at the gate and the tide of nightmare creatures flowing out of it. A strange expression appeared on his face. I might die, but I do need more memories, so I guess my greed is much greater than my fear. With that, he groaned and hoisted himself on top of his black steed. It was time to join the fight, next. Sonny knew that he would not be able to do a lot in this fight, but then again, he did not have to. Right now, his role was to support Saint and let his shadows do all the heavy lifting. Maybe that was how he was supposed to fight every battle, really. But sadly, fate rarely gave him such opportunities. In any case, there was one thing that he could do. Dismissing the sin of solace and the dying wish to get back a bit of essence, he summoned the shadow lantern instead. As soon as it manifested, Sonny tossed the lantern in the direction where the towering gate guardian, a monstrous arachnid wielding 6 weapons carved of bone, advanced on Saint. He did not have enough essence to sustain the divine memory's enchantment for long, but he did have enough to open its gate, unleashing a swarm of shadows onto the battlefield. The darkness enveloping it grew even deeper than it had been before. In the next moment, Sonny and Nightmare slammed into the crowd of the abominations. Crap! The rest of the battle was a hazy mayhem of violence. Sonny struggled to remain atop his black steed, lamenting that there had not been enough time to saddle it. At some point, he simply slid to the ground, using Nightmare's body to shield himself from the enemies. Not trusting himself to wield a weapon that demanded strength in his weakened state, Sonny summoned the Moonlight Shard instead. A beautiful chalice of white jade appeared in his other hand. Submerging the narrow blade of the ghostly stiletto into the black liquid, he used it to strike at the cracks in the enemy armor and finish off those abominations that Nightmare had wounded with his fangs, horns, and steel hooves. At some point, other soldiers and Awakened joined the fight. More nightmare creatures emerged from the gate, and more humans threw themselves into the meat grinder to stop the enemy from reaching the streets of the city. Their resistance was desperate and haphazard, but for now, at least, they held the tide of abominations back. Beyond the wall, obscured by the hideous rift of the Nightmare Gate, the sky was painted white by lightning. Sonny knew that they were going to win when the spell whispered into his ear, its voice drowning out the sounds of the battle. You have slain a corrupted devil, Silkway Archon. Your shadow grows stronger. Staggering back, he let out a relieved sigh and glanced in the direction where Saint had been fighting the gate guardian. The creature lay sprawled on the ground, its limbs severed and its massive body cleaved apart. His shadow was standing above it, her black blade already seeking another target. Saint's armor was battered, and there were thin streams of fine ruby dust flowing from the breaches. However, wreathed in darkness, her body seemed to be healing already. Without ever slowing down, she shook the dark blood off her sword and dashed forward to face a new enemy. With the gate guardian slain, the scales of battle slowly started to tip in favor of humans. Sonny was not of much use, but with Saint and Nightmare rampaging amidst the abominations, dealing with them was not an insurmountable task. And then almost abruptly, the battle was over. Sonny leaned tiredly on a piece of rubble, observing the scene of utter slaughter. His armor was bloodied, but his body was nearly devoid of wounds. Most had been healed by the dying wish, and the rest were repaired by the living stone. Having a magical shell reinforcing his skin was very handy. He still felt terrible, though. Around him, awakened and mundane soldiers were busy building improvised barricades around the gate. The first wave of abominations might have been destroyed, but more could emerge from the rift at any moment. A few of them suddenly froze, staring at a menacing black figure that had emerged from the darkness into the dim light. Saint's eyes burned with demonic crimson light, and her onyx armor was glistening, awash in the blood of the arachnid warriors. She looked both graceful and terrifying. One of the soldiers raised his rifle with trembling hands, but the other suddenly shouted, his eyes wide. "Mongrel, it's Lord Mongrel." A hum of voices soon rose above the barricade. "Mongrel is in Falcon Scott. He killed the gate guardian. It was him." "It's clearly a she, you idiot. Thank you, Lady Mongrel. We're saved." Ignoring them, Saint passed between the invigorated soldiers indifferently, the broken oath long dismissed. She approached Sunny and froze, looming above him like a beautiful monument of darkness. Her ruby eyes stared at him intently. Unaccustomed to craning his neck to look at Saint, Sunny awkwardly cleared his throat. "A good job out there. You really saved my skin." She lingered for a few moments, slowly raised her hand, and poked him in the cheek with a finger. Then Saint tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. Her ruby eyes betrayed a hint of some unknown emotion, making Sunny blink. "What is happening?" Without saying anything, of course. The taciturn shadow then took a step back and turned away, looking at the gate. However, she seemed strangely pleased. Sunny blinked a few more times, then rubbed his cheek. "Oh, all right." Was it because of the marble shell? He shook his head, knowing that there was no time to waste pondering the weird occurrence. Maybe he imagined the whole thing. "Anyway, I have to go. Stay here in case more nightmare creatures emerge, and don't let any of them escape into the city. I'll leave Nightmare with you." Sunny had to find out if the battle against the devouring cloud was over, whether there were more gates that had opened within the city, how his men were doing. Most importantly, he had to find Master Jet. Leaving the gloomy shadow with Saint, he wrapped the other three around his body, grimaced, and started walking. Despite the fact that there were no physical wounds on his body, Sunny still felt hurt. Every step was a struggle. But what else was new? Whispering quiet curses, he summoned the cruel sight to use as a walking stick and headed deeper into the staging area. Sunny did not have to wander the stretch of the staging area that had been ruined by the destruction of the wall for long. It was a mess, with collapsed prefab buildings laying shattered and broken, buried under piles of alloy debris. Finding anyone here would have been a challenge. Before he allowed himself to drown in dark thoughts, however, a familiar black bird appeared from above and landed on a bent steel beam protruding from the ground nearby. The crow waved its wings, clearly agitated and cawed. "Jet, Jet." Sunny let out a shaky breath, feeling a lot of relief. If the echo was still here, Soul Reaper couldn't be dead. He took a step toward the bird and asked, "Where is she?" Instead of answering, the crow flew away, landed on a communication relay a dozen meters away, and looked back expectantly. In this way, the echo led Sunny to Master Jet. After finding her, Sunny remained silent for a few moments. Then he coughed. "Well, that was not what I expected to see." Jet was hanging upside down, her body caught in the jagged mess of torn alloy beams. One of them was piercing her abdomen like a hook, and her arm was caught between two others. Despite the ghastly situation, there was a calm and slightly annoyed expression on Soul Reaper's face. "Yeah, well, care to help me get down? I can do it myself, of course, but I would prefer for my insides to remain on the inside for a little bit longer." She could probably free herself. Simple alloy would not have held back a master for long, but with how thoroughly trapped Jet was, ripping herself off the hook would have probably exacerbated her wounds by a lot. Not everyone had the lineage of a tenacious demon to help them recover and skin as hard as enchanted marble. Sunny studied the tangled mess of alloy beams, then floated up with the help of the dark wing and carefully pulled Master Jet off the jagged hook. With a quiet hiss, she slid off the bloodied alloy and fell down, landing softly on her feet. "Arg, damn it!" Jet clutched her abdomen with a grimace and then slowly straightened. Sunny landed nearby and looked at her with concern. Are you going to be all right?" Instead of answering, Soul Reaper spat a mouthful of blood, then looked at him with a dark smile. Her teeth were all painted red, so the smile was not very reassuring. "Don't worry about it. I am a very sturdy girl, woman. Whatever. The point is, it will be as good as new in a couple of days, even without a healer." Sonny scratched the back of his head, then hesitated for a few moments. Eventually, he said, "I was afraid that you died." Master Jet laughed, then winced and clutched her wound tighter. "Died? That's the last thing you should be afraid of. Believe me, Sonny, I won't die on this god-forsaken continent. It's impossible." He shook his head at her bravado, then sighed. "All right, do you want me to tell you how the battle went?" Soul Reaper waved her hand. Crow saw it. "Good job handling the gate. I am a bit embarrassed that I wasn't there to help. There are several others that opened either near or within the city. All of them were contained. It's just this particular one that was an unpleasant surprise. The devouring cloud also seems to have retreated for now." She frowned. "You noticed it too, right?" Sonny nodded with a dark expression. A new tyrant must have risen from within the swarm. The damned leeches were acting too purposefully. Master Jet used his shoulder for support and pulled him forward. They slowly walked through the ruins of the staging area, looking like two cripples. "Yeah, that is why the devouring cloud pulled away before being destroyed. It will probably be back later." Sonny closed his eyes for a moment. "Gods, there are so many priority targets converging on the city. I hoped that we would destroy at least one today." He glanced at Jet, his eyes tired. "So what do we do now?" She simply shrugged. "Go find our people, rest, recover, prepare to repeat the whole thing tomorrow." Indeed, what else was there to do? Life was a constant struggle. Since the wall was broken now, they had to find an elevator that would take them to the proper side of the breach. Even worse, the pulse of the gate had destroyed a lot of fine machinery, so finding a working platform was not easy. Eventually, however, they made it to the top of the defensive barrier and returned to the position of the irregulars. The first one they saw was Winter, who sat tiredly on the alloy surface of the battlement, her eyes hidden once again behind the sunglasses. A thin crack ran through one of the lenses. Hearing their steps, she turned her head slightly. A pale smile appeared on her face. "The heroes return. You too look like crap." Master Jet scoffed, which caused her to wince once again. "Thanks for the compliment." Sonny helped her sit down, then looked around, searching for his cohort. Noticing the towering figure of Dorn a dozen or so meters away, he sighed with relief and asked, his voice almost devoid of tension, "So how did it go? Do we have any casualties?" Winter did not respond, prompting him to look down. Her face was uncharacteristically somber. Sonny felt something cold brush against his heart. "What?" The ascended archer sighed, then looked down. "About that, I'm sorry, Sonny. Things were a bit chaotic back there." He remained motionless for a while, then turned away and silently headed toward where he had seen Dorn. As Sonny approached, he mentally counted. Dorn Bell Luster Kim Samara. When he reached the cohort, they turned to him, their faces pale and grim. Kim's eyes were glistening, and she avoided looking directly at him. Luster was the first one to speak, his tone subdued. "Captain Wee." Sonny cut him off. "Show me." They stepped aside, revealing the figure of Quentin, who was laying on the cold alloy with his eyes closed. Sonny found himself taking a few steps forward and kneeling beside the gallant healer. His face was calm, and his body seemed untouched except for a shallow wound on the side of his head. His chest was rising and falling, which meant that Quentin was still alive. He had not been killed, he had just lost consciousness. However, it did not matter. Sonny closed his eyes. Quentin had lost consciousness near an active gate, which meant that his soul was stolen away by the call. He had been thrown into an unexplored, dire region of the dream realm, surrounded by numerous nightmare creatures and abominations so vile that words could not describe them. His only chance of survival was to fight his way to a seed, challenge it, and conquer the second nightmare alone. For all intents and purposes, Quentin was already dead. A few hours later, Sonny found himself alone in the Rhino. The area surrounding the military barracks was quiet, and the interior of the APC was dark. He sat on his bed, unmoving, his eyes like two pools of darkness. He was cold. It is what it is. War was like that. People died all the time. Sonny had sent many to their deaths himself. He was not new to losing soldiers. And yet, he was weak. His body and soul were both in pain because of the brush with the nightmare gate, but somehow his heart hurt much worse. There was a lot for him to do. Feeding Saint, continuing his attempts to weave a memory from the devil's needle. However, Sonny felt unwilling to move, or maybe incapable. He just sat silently and stared into the darkness. After some time, his communicator lit up. He looked at it, then slowly brought the screen to his face. There was a new message from Rain. Rain, hey Sonny. It is really hard to imagine that it is winter in Antarctica and that the night there lasts for many months. And that aurora thing you described, I looked it up on the network and wow, it's so pretty. There's nothing like that in NQSC. Well, you know, we can hardly even see stars here because of the light pollution and the air being full of dust. However, the weather is warm and the nights are short, so I won't complain. You stay warm too. Nothing really interesting happened to me. Did anything interesting happen to you? How are you doing? I hope everything is all right. Sonny remained motionless for a while, staring at the screen. Then he closed his eye for a moment, took a deep breath, and started writing a response. Sonny, hey, Rain. Lots of interesting things happened to me, of course. I am one of the most interesting people in two whole worlds after all. Didn't you know? I am doing great too. I mean, all things considered. Since I am such a dashing and heroic figure, people go around giving me sandwiches, medals, and the like. So. Sonny paused for a few seconds, then briefly wiped his eyes and continued. Life is pretty sweet, hold you wretches. A mass of nightmare creatures was advancing through a city street, mere meters away from slamming into a makeshift barricade formed by the hulking frames of firing MWPs. The surface of the road was broken and melted, and the ruins of the surrounding buildings were enveloped in flames. Leaping off a slowly collapsing roof, Sonny plummeted down and landed between the abominations. The jade blade of the Sin of Solace moved, sending fountains of blood into the air. He dashed sideways, dodging a stream of bullets, and groaned. It was already the second week of the siege, but the damage done to his body and soul by the nightmare gate was slow to heal. Sonny shrugged off the pain and called upon the shadows, erecting a black wall of them to block off the street. Flamethrowers. The pilots of the MWPs did not stop firing their mass drivers, but long streams of orange-red fire shot from their wrists over the wall. Sonny danced between the flames, circulating his essence to activate the underworld armament. The effect of the memory of fire was enhanced, elevating his elemental resistance even higher. The nightmare creatures were not that lucky. While he dealt with the head of the swarm, Bell and Dorn attacked its tail from the flanks. A sharp sword and a heavy sledgehammer made short work of the frenzied abominations, and at the same time, charged tungsten rounds flashed from a nearby dormitory tower, slaying the most dangerous targets without fail. Caught between the hammer and the anvil, the swarm swiftly melted. The last one to die was a hideous creature with hardy scales covering its reptilian body. Sonny simply struck the abomination with the edge of his palm, turning it as heavy as a boulder and as hard as stone. The reptile's skull shattered, disintegrating into a disgusting rain of blood and bone. Even before the heavy body touched the ground, the spell was already whispering. You have slain an awakened monster, scaled prowler. You have received a memory. His eyes glinted. Another memory. Wiping his hand with a revolted expression, Sonny looked around. Luster and Kim appeared on a nearby roof, signaling that none of the creatures escaped. He let out a sigh of relief. The situation was under control. After the ill-fated battle with the devouring cloud, the pressure on the defenders of Falcon Scott had steadily increased. The fact that there was a giant breach in the wall did not help things one bit. Eventually, the defensive barrier had been broken through in 2 more places, forcing the First Army to evacuate civilians deeper into the city and create a secondary ring of defense on the empty streets. The topography of the siege was not simple anymore. Humans still held the wall, deflecting most of the nightmare creatures from its height, but now various sections of the Great Barrier were separated, almost turning into independent fortresses. A detachment of soldiers was tasked with defending the breaches from the ground. They mostly managed to prevent the nightmare creatures from breaking through the barricades into the city, even if the rate of casualties among the ground crews was much higher. However, some abominations still reached the streets from time to time. Sonny had just dealt with one of these invading swarms. That's the 4th one today, not a good sign. He bent in a painful coughing fit, feeling a sickening weakness permeate his body once again. After a while, the coughing subsided, and Sonny remained motionless for a few moments, breathed hoarsely and waiting for the weakness to subside. Soon it was gone, and all that remained was a gnawing pain in his chest. Damnation! He straightened and glanced at his people, who were making their way through the burning carnage of the destroyed city street. Once they reached him, everyone except Samara, who was still in her sniper nest on top of the empty dormitory tower, Sonny glanced at Kim and asked, "Any updates from Soul Reaper?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. Master Dale pushed the enemy back, reclaiming control over Breach Sea. We are ordered to stand down and rest. Our next shift starts in 16 hours. Sonny tiredly rubbed his face. 16 hours. Huh? Either Army Command is feeling generous or they expect real trouble tomorrow. Well, all the more reason to make sure that we're fresh and full of essence. Signal Sam to come down and retreat to the barracks." He studied his soldiers for a moment, making sure that none of them was wounded. Without a healer in the cohort, recovering between battles had become somewhat tricky. It demanded outside help at least. Fortunately, the members of the cohort were unscathed. He nodded, letting them go, and turned around. The MWPs stood motionless, the incandescent barrels of their guns glowing in the gloom. The coolant liquid was dripping down, evaporating into clouds of haze. Some pilots had opened the cockpits, sitting on the doors of the hatches with tired expressions on their faces. They would retreat inside soon, chased back into the overheated war machines by smoke and the smell of charred corpses. But for now at least, the soldiers were enjoying the short moment of respite in the coldness of the never-ending night. Noticing Sonny, one of the pilots raised a hand and made it into a fist. Sonny returned the stalwart salute and then silently walked away. A few minutes later he stumbled, grabbing a wall in a dark and isolated alley. The Sin of Solace whispered, mocking him, but it was not too hard to suppress the hateful voice these days. Sonny rested for a few moments and then took a step back. Saint emerged from the shadows, as silent and menacing as ever. Nightmare joined her, moonlight glinting on his adamantine horns. Sonny sighed and summoned the overpriced saddle. Fastening its straps on the black stallion, he glanced at the 2 shadows and said, "You know what to do. I'll return in 16 hours. Be cautious today. Chances are we'll have to go all out tomorrow." Saint nodded indifferently, then mounted the dark destrier and outstretched a hand. Sonny placed the hilt of the Sin of Solace into it, at the same time sending 2 of his shadows forth. Then he watched the taciturn knight leave as she headed in the direction of the wall. These days, the two of them worked in shifts. If the Devil of Antarctica was not defending Falcon Scott, the guardian angel of Antarctica did. Millions of people had already been evacuated from the doomed city, but millions more remained. The siege capital could not be allowed to fall yet. Sonny coughed some more, uttered a quiet curse, and walked in the opposite direction of where Saint had left. As he walked through the empty streets, Sonny breathed in the cold winter air and tried to calm his wildly beating heart. He should not have been that fatigued, but he was. The strange ailment tormenting him had become less severe in the last couple of days, however. It was not gone yet. Ah, cursed! Sonny grimaced, then noticed a group of soldiers ahead and forced himself to put on the mask of a confident commander. Mundane humans looked up to masters, and if they saw one walking around with hollow eyes and a troubled expression, their morale would suffer. He had never thought that being preoccupied with concerns about people's morale would become something he bothered with, yet here he was. As Sonny walked closer, he heard bits and pieces of their conversation. "I saw Mongrel fight yesterday. Gods, he truly is a fiend. My whole unit would have been dead if not for him. I wish I could thank the man, but he is definitely not from the First Army. Maybe he's a legacy from a local Antarctica clan." No, haven't you heard the rumors? Mongrel is that master from the first irregular company, the Devil. You lost your damn mind, fool. Mongrel is like 2 meters tall, while Master Sunless is on the shorter side. Believe me, I saw them side by side the day the wall was first breached. Also, Mongrel is definitely a woman. Yeah, I saw it too. She even caressed his cheek more like poked it. Wait, guys, do you think there's something going on between them? You are all idiots. Mongrel is obviously several people. Usually, hearing such conversations amused Sonny, but this time he remained detached and indifferent. The soldiers grew silent when he approached, straightened, and then bowed respectfully. He nodded at them in passing and continued on his way, uncaring. Ah, but that reminds me. Sonny summoned the runes and glanced at the description of Saint. Shadow fragments, 185/200. So close. With the 2 memories he received today, one from an awakened monster, the other from a fallen beast, the counter would increase by 2 fragments, bringing it to 187. From here, he only needed 13 more for Saint to transcend. He was somewhat pressed for time, but also had a few of his personal memories that could be sacrificed to accelerate the process. Things were still going according to plan. It's the weaving that is the problem. I feel like I am almost there, but the Midnight Shard is still giving me trouble. Too risky. Sonny pondered the intricacies of the spellweave, grimacing when the thundering clamor of the distant battle grew especially loud and made it harder to think. Gradually, the noise became quieter, although it never went away entirely. Sonny passed through the barricades, left the secondary defense ring, and entered the crowded streets of Falcon Scott. Despite the fact that numerous civilians had to be relocated deeper into the city, the signs of the overpopulation were not as dire as one could have expected. The naval convoy had been busy ferrying the refugees across the strait, after all. By now, somewhere around 80 million people had already been transported to the relative, extremely safety of eastern Antarctica. It almost looked as though Army Command's plan was working. Seeing actual proof that all his efforts were not in vain made Sonny feel a little better. Up ahead, a crowd of refugees was waiting in line to receive rations. He studied it for a moment, noticing a familiar figure handing out packs of synth paste at the front. Sonny smiled a little, then headed in that direction. As he walked closer, the person growled without looking up. "You better not be cutting the line, Ba." Then Bate looked up and blinked a couple of times. "Oh, Sonny, what are you doing here?" He shrugged. "On my way back from the wall." She called one of the other volunteers to switch with her, then led him aside, to a humming heat projector. Bates stopped in front of it, shivering and rubbing her hands together. "How was your day?" Sunny remained silent for a bit, not knowing how to answer. "Hectic." The young woman glanced at him and scoffed. "A man of few words are you now?" Sunny shrugged again. "How is the old man? Did you guys receive placement in the queue yet?" Bates sighed. "No, people say that another ship went down in the strait, so many placements were postponed again. As for Professor, he is doing fine. The Army got him consulting on how to upgrade the communication array, so he has something to do at least." She looked at him questioningly. "Are you coming over today?" Sunny hesitated, then slowly shook his head. "No, there's a lot I have to do. Also, my gut tells me that tomorrow will be a tough day. Your dormitory is away from the wall, but still, be careful. Well, you know the drill." The young woman turned back to the heat projector. Yeah. Then she suddenly opened the bag hanging over her shoulder, scrounged in it, and took out a tube of toothpaste. "Here, you forgot this last time." Sunny blinked a couple of times. "I did not forget it. I left it for you because I know that the supply chain is in shambles." Bate tilted her head and looked at him fiercely. "You think I can't get us some toothpaste?" Sunny laughed. "I mean, if you are so principled, then why are you not returning the 2 cans of coffee I left in your dormitory as well?" The young woman looked down, her cheeks turning slightly red. What cans of coffee? I haven't seen anything of the sort." Sunny nodded a couple of times and gently pushed the toothpaste away. Okay. Anyway, I'll try to drop by soon. If you do find that coffee, please enjoy it." He bid Bate an awkward farewell and walked away, feeling slightly refreshed. Here in the city proper, public transportation was still functioning. There were military vehicles rolling down the streets as well. It did not take him long to reach the barracks. Entering the Rhino, Sunny looked around, his gaze pausing on one of the closed sleeping pods. Then he walked to the back of the APC, dragged the Devil's Needle from its place on the floor of the armory, and sighed. 15 hours left, but I probably should sleep for at least a couple." Shaking his head, he got to work. Sunny did not recall falling asleep, but he was woken up by someone banging on the hatch of the Rhino. Sitting up, he looked around and realized that he must have passed out while studying the weave of the Midnight Shard. The austere tackeye was still laying on the holographic table, glinting as if to mock him. He had almost solved the problem. That elusive element of the weave was almost isolated, but too. As someone banged on the hatch once again, making the massive APC shake a little, Sunny flinched, rubbed his face, and went to the hatch. "Coming to the hell." He opened the hatch and froze, swallowing the rest of his irritated shout. "Oh, Master Jet, good morning." She glanced at him with amusement. "Technically, it's evening. Go wipe the drool off your face and come out, Sunny. We've been summoned to attend a meeting." He frowned, then threw an angry look at the gloomy shadow, which was hiding in the darkness not too far away. The bastard was supposed to warn him if anything approached, protecting Sunny from a sudden attack or from embarrassing himself, in theory. The shadow shrugged innocently and looked away. Shaking his head, Sunny returned inside and quickly washed his face. A couple of minutes later, he left the APC and closed the hatch behind him. Since Soul Reaper mentioned that he had to come out, they were most likely heading for the complex that the local branch of the 1st Army Command used as headquarters. It was only a short distance from the barracks. Indeed, Jet walked in that direction, with Sunny following as he looked around with sleepy eyes. A few moments later, he asked, "What is the meeting about?" She shrugged. "We'll find out. All I know is that White Feather wants to see us." "White Feather, huh?" The two of them made their way to the Army headquarters, but then walked past it, approaching a heavily fortified compound instead. Winter and Dale were already waiting for them near the gates, looking as ragged and fatigued as Sunny. He greeted them. "I heard you retook Breach C yesterday. Must have been a tough fight." Dale simply shrugged. "Not really. We still hold both sections of the wall above the breach, so all I had to do was persuade the abominations to stay put until the garrison forces shredded them with ranged weapons." He remained silent for a moment and then added, "Things would have been much worse if they were better climbers, though." Sunny nodded somberly. Together, they entered the compound and were led to a spacious room on one of the underground levels. There, two people were waiting for them. Master Roan was standing in front of a false window, studying the projected image of the night sky. His face was painted ghostly green by the ethereal tapestry of the swirling aurora. St. Tyrus was motionless, sitting in an imposing chair with her back held straight. Sunny had not seen Sky Tide in a while, at least in her human form. She looked battered. Her elegant armor was bent and broken, white steel marred by dried blood. Her hair, which had once fallen down like a cascade of pale gold, now looked lifeless and bleak. Her dazzlingly beautiful face was pale, blackened by ugly bruises. It seemed that holding the winter beast back was taking a toll on the transcendent of the White Feather clan. Her expression was still aloof and stern, however, and her amber eyes burned with the same fierce, cold resolve. Master Roan turned at the sound of the steps. "Ah, ascended Jet, ascended Winter, ascended Dale, Sunless, welcome. Sorry for the sudden invitation." Sunny noticed black circles under the handsome man's eyes. Roan was acting uncharacteristically subdued, his usual charisma gone. That did not bode well. Master Jet waved a hand. "War waits for no one. What did you want to discuss?" Roan smiled slightly. "Straight to business. Well, it is for the best. There is not much time to prepare." He walked away from the false window and stopped beside Sky Tide, then gestured at the holographic projection in front of them. On it, the map of the surrounding area disappeared, replaced by the blurry image of a grotesque creature. Leathery wings, lean body with 6 segmented legs, a tail that ended with a long, jagged stinger and 3 long necks, each ending in a harrowing circular maw. The abominations looked like a mix between a wyvern, a worm, and a scorpion. It was large, formidable, and utterly hideous. "Our scouts have confirmed that the devouring cloud has produced a new tyrant. A fallen one, but still a dire threat to the survival of the city. The creature mostly hides within the swarm, controlling it from behind." Winter cursed. "Yeah, we figured as much after the last time." Master Roan slowly nodded. "It is our priority to eliminate the tyrant. The devouring cloud will descend on Falcon Scott today. You will be the blade to strike its puppeteer down." The irregulars glanced at each other. After a short pause, Jet asked, "How do you know that the swarm will come?" Roan frowned slightly, but before he could answer, St. Tyrus suddenly spoke. "Because our clan will lure it here." The 4 ascended grew silent, looking at her incredulously. Sky Tide met their gazes with a calm expression, her face as motionless as ever. Somewhat stunned by that confession, Sunny asked, "Why the hell would you do that?" Sky Tide inhaled deeply, then turned away. "Goliath draws near. We have to eradicate other threats before he comes. If they attack together, you can imagine the devastation. The window of opportunity grows narrower with each day, so we can't passively wait for the devouring cloud to return anymore. So Roan and other awakened warriors of my clan will lure it here. Today." She glanced at the irregulars, studied them for a few moments, and added, "Ascended Winter will contain the swarm. Roan will bring the tyrant down. The 3 of you will make sure that the creature never takes flight again. That is the battle plan." Sunny smiled darkly. What if Winter fails to hold back the swarm? What if Roan fails to isolate the tyrant? What if the three of us fail to kill it in time? St. Tyrus looked at him for a while, her amber eyes both beautiful and cold. Then she said simply, "Don't fail." Master Jet laughed. Shaking her head, she patted Sunny on the shoulder and walked toward the projection of the fallen tyrant. "All right, I like that plan. Let's discuss the details." The discussion did not take long. Soon, the irregulars said their goodbyes to Sky Tide and headed to the exit, each in a hurry to prepare for the coming battle. Sunny, however, stayed back after a bit of hesitation. When there were only three of them left in the room, Sky Tide, Roan, and him, Sunny glanced at the battered transcendent with a complicated expression. After a few moments, he said, "You must have heard that another of Valor's saints was killed." St. Tyrus stared at him silently, not saying anything. Sunny tilted his head a little. "You and I have helped that monster escape from the Night Temple. If it weren't for you, I would have been dead, and Mordred would have still been contained. Do you regret saving me now that he is out there, slaughtering people?" Sky Tide remained motionless for a bit, then shook her head. "No." A pale smile appeared on Sunny's face. "Why?" She sighed. "Years ago, when the young Prince of War came to the Chained Isles, I offered him my hospitality. Like any other awakened, he was under my protection, roaming the dream realm in search of something, much like you did. When Valor plotted to ambush and eliminate him, I followed orders and did nothing to prevent it. I have carried the shame of that wrongdoing ever since." He pondered her words for a few moments. "They had a very good reason to get rid of him, though. That guy is like a nightmare creature. There's not much human left in him." St. Tyrus looked him in the eye, her beautiful face expressionless. "Is it worth it to do the wrong thing for the right reason? No. Life is unpredictable and the future is unclear. All we can strive for is to act according to our principles and do what we consider right. The rest doesn't matter." Sunny looked around, his gaze lingering on the traces of dried blood on Sky Tide's armor. His eyes turned dark. "Doing the right thing is what got you, and your clan banished to this hellhole." She looked at the false window, where the image of the night sky was projected. A full moon was shining on its velvet expanse, surrounded by the lights of the ghostly aurora. A hint of some deep, hidden emotion appeared on Sky Tide's beautiful face. After a while, she said, "The sky is suffocating here, but other than that, this is precisely where I wanted to be." Sunny lingered for a few moments, then bowed slightly to Master Roan and silently walked away. He had to prepare for battle. Standing on the battlement and peering into the cold darkness beyond, Sunny had a contemplative expression on his face. The wind smelled of snow as it played with his black hair, which had grown a bit too long by now. Pale moonlight permeated the air, failing to reach the ravaged land. Winter and Dale were sitting nearby, leaning on the alloy parapet of the wall and sharing a flask. The two captains seemed calm, one in her usual relaxed manner, the other solemn and staid. As the contents of the flask ran out, Winter sighed and looked at Sunny. "You seem terribly serious today." He lingered for a moment, then shrugged. "Just thinking about stuff." She did not press, content to rest with her eyes hidden behind the cracked sunglasses. Sunny felt strangely thoughtful after his conversation with St. Tyrus. He was not sure that he agreed with her uncompromising views, but there was one thing Sky Tide had said that was unquestionably true. Life was, indeed, unpredictable. Take his own relationship with the Steely Saint. Sunny did not know St. Tyrus very well or share any of her principles, but he found himself respecting the stern transcendent a great deal. He liked Master Roan, too. The three of them even shared some history. Several years ago, Sunny had held nothing but contempt toward legacies. He had regarded them as arrogant, dangerous, and hateful people, someone who did not deserve the unfair privileges bestowed upon them by nothing except for birthright. Who would have thought that he would come to value and admire some of them, one day. Take Cassie, too. When she surrendered his secret to Nephi's on the forgotten shore, Sonny had thought that it was the darkest moment of his life. And yet, if she had not made that choice, he would have stayed behind a sleeper. Sonny had no way of knowing if he would have survived the same journey-changing Star had. What he did know, though, was that Rain would have been dead if not for his return. If Sonny had not been there to hold back the tide of nightmare creature advancing on her school, his sister would have been ripped apart by the rampaging abominations. There were too many instances like that to count. Life was unpredictable, and no one could predict the twists and turns of fate, except for Weaver, perhaps. Even oracles like Cassie could only see glimpses of it, blind to the context and powerless to change the outcome. So where did it leave him? The same place where I started, I guess. An ignorant fool struggling against something he could not even comprehend. Antarctica, at least, was terribly straightforward. With a sigh, Sonny moved strands of hair away from his eyes and sat down near Winter and Dale. His hands were aching for a simple fight. How much more do we have to wait, damn it? Dale glanced at him with a smile so faint that it was almost non-existent. Rest while you can. You'll be regretting that this calm did not last longer very soon. Sonny grimaced and looked away, staring at a squad of soldiers that marched by. The soldiers were acting a bit strange, sticking painstakingly to the better illuminated parts of the battlement and hastening their steps in the darker areas. Their faces were glum and nervous. He frowned. What's up with them? Winter turned her head slightly, studying the soldiers. Haven't you heard the rumors? Sonny thought for a moment, then shook his head. What rumors? The ascended archer chuckled. You should really come out of your APC more often, you know. Well, anyway, there are a lot of scary stories spreading among the refugees these days, one more nonsensical than the other. The latest story is that there is a shadow wraith stalking the city, hiding somewhere in the darkness. Apparently, it lures people away from light, never to be seen again. She took a deep breath and then added in a more somber tone. Although, maybe there's some truth to that one. Soldiers are not usually easily spooked, but as you can see, they are on edge. Too many disappearances lately. Sonny frowned. In a city of 200 million, there were bound to be some disappearances, especially with the nightmare spell infecting people left and right. However, he felt concerned. A shadow wraith that was right up his alley, no. There could also be a different explanation for the increased number of disappearances. The terror of Low 49 was known to start its meals in just that manner. In any case, he sensed some unease. A shadow creature, I don't know. They're extremely rare. I only ever met one in the wild, and even that was inside a nightmare. I'm not sure if any survived to this day. Well, there was that one little bastard who got a chunk of his flesh. Did scavengers need to devour a corpse to inherit new abilities, or would any piece of flesh suffice? What were the chances of the vile gremlin developing an affinity to shadows? Dale simply shrugged. If there is something strange going on, Army Command should already be investigating. Since we weren't officially informed, either the rumors are baseless, or the incidents are not serious enough to inform the irregulars. Regardless, we should concentrate on the task at hand. As if on cue, there was the sound of light steps, and Master Jet approached from further along the wall. The members of her cohort, now fewer than before, followed. She looked around briefly, then said, I've just received the word. Roan and his people are approaching. The devouring cloud is in a frenzy, don't know what they did, but it worked. Prepare yourself. The rest of the defending force seemed to have received the same news. All along the southern stretch of the wall, a flurry of activity commenced. Soldiers were checking their weapons for the last time. Awakened were summoning their memories. Rail gun crews were hurriedly finishing maintenance procedures and dragging crates of tungsten rounds closer to the feeding mechanisms. Thousands of turrets came alive, turning their twin barrels toward the sky. Sunny stood up and stretched, breathing in the cold winter air. Looking at the members of his cohort, he grinned. Same deal as the last time. Hopefully no actually never mind. I'm not saying it aloud. Just do well and don't die. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.